So today we have a really important episode. Of course, I think all episodes are important, but this one in particular, anyone that knows me and knows anything about the CARE Project knows that I'm very passionate about raising male breast cancer awareness, which is why I'm part of the Male Breast Cancer Coalition as an ally, if you will. And joining me today are three women who have lost their husbands to breast cancer. So we have Linda Holden. Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Tammy Porter.
Hello.
Welcome back, Tammy. Tammy
Thank
has a
you.
great previous episode that we recorded all about her experience with caring for Mike. And then Pat Washburn.
Hello.
Pat is a lead advocate for the Male Breast Cancer Coalition, right?
Yes,
Famous for her Marlin Mobile.
my Marlin Mobile.
Yeah,
Yep.
we'll talk about in a future episode. Also, my co-host and producer Chris Donovan is here,
Hey, everyone.
and next to me, Dr. Gary Johnson,
Hi, how you doing?
special co-host of the day. So I know all three of these women because of the Male Breast Cancer Coalition. You're all three part of it, advocates and participants in all the conversations. And every month there's a go-to meeting to discuss various topics relative to breast cancer in general, research, development, advocacy, awareness. And we were all three on a call recently listening to the story of Dr. Matthew Knowles, better known as Beyonce's father, who was diagnosed with breast cancer, I think a little over a year ago, wasn't it? You guys know?
Yes.
Yeah, it
It
was during the summer.
July
Mhm.
19, I think.
Okay, so that discussion that we had was a peer-to-peer discussion, really, because everybody in the room was either a survivor, a caregiver, a widow, a doctor, a researcher, right? So the discussion left, how do you say it, Chris?
Kind of a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. So I had separate conversations with all three of these women after, like my phone was blowing up through Facebook Messenger and text messages and emails. And so I just decided we're just going to hop on this call and let's talk about it. So I specifically wanted Tammy on this because Tammy was married to Mike, who was a very manly man, a black man, and Dr. Knowles is marketing his, how do you say it? His self-proclaimed marketing expertise leads him to call his diagnosis chest cancer versus breast cancer. And that is his marketing spin. So specifically, I asked Tammy after the call, what did her marketing mind, not her widow mind, think? What did her marketing mind think of that? And how do you feel about his spin?
Yeah, so I have over 20 years of marketing experience. And so when he started talking marketing, of course, my ears perked up and I was like, oh, I can probably relate. And then I was so shocked because he got so off track. And what he was really saying was in the Black community, and he was specifically talking about Black and brown men, but in the Black community, there is a certain level of expectation of masculinity and, machismo and things that actually are cultural, which no one is denying that fact at all. But he was saying that he basically dumbs down his message and makes it so that it's more approachable for that community to understand. So he says chest cancer so as not to offend that masculine male. And so while I get from a marketing perspective why that might have been the case or why he might believe that, every bit of my marketing expertise tells me that you never stray from a brand name. You never stray from actually talking about the topic. You may use different vernacular when you're approaching people. You may use slang and a softer approach depending on your target market, but you don't stray from the proper nouns of things. You don't stray from your particular brand name. And so my sensitivities were really up because there's so much that has gone and does go into generations of breast cancer marketing experience from a medical field, from an awareness perspective, and to stray from that brand name in particular, from the proper noun of breast cancer to make it something else, you lose the connection to all of that years and years of experience and all of those things. So I get what he was trying to say, but I think his approach is way off.
So as a wife of a man who died, a Black man who died from breast cancer, you've been down that road where the initial
Absolutely.
diagnosis hits and it's like, what? I can't
Yes.
have breast cancer. I'm a man. So talk a little
Right.
bit about that.
Right. So that's one of the, then I mentioned this to you after the call, but one of my biggest peeves with all of the breast cancer research and things that have been done is that it is so women focused, and it's, just as we've all discussed, it's pink everywhere, and and that can be off-putting to men. And so when my husband was diagnosed, Black or not, it was more of a shock that, wow, I have breast tissue. Wow, I have this extra estrogen in my body that's fueling this cancer in a way that we never even thought was possible because we just did not know. And so by simply changing the name to chest versus breast, you're not making that awareness any greater, right? And so in the Black community, I think that there was, like maybe a modicum of concern for him to say the word breast, or to feel like it was emasculating. The problem was really when we got into treatment and the years that followed before his death, where he did not feel at home in the hospital. He didn't feel at home in the clinics. He didn't feel like he was welcomed into a community where he had the same disease as the women sitting next to him. And even though the treatments were identical, the medications he was taking were identical, he was doing all of the same things, yet that stigma exists where it is pink and it is women only. And that's where the marketing really, if we're going to put any effort into marketing, let's put it there, where we actually are letting people know that this is the same disease. It absolutely is the same disease.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think it's the first thing I said. I don't have cancer personally. And I'm on the show because, Carrie is awesome and we have a good time. But the first time when she told me chest cancer, I was like, oh, great. There's another kind of cancer out there I have to worry about. So,
Right.
so when that was the first thing that came to my mind. So I can't even imagine being through all of it and then somebody saying that.
And I was just like put off personally because I'm thinking he made it seem like it was such an embarrassing thing, and not even just for males, but for females
Absolutely.
as well, is the way I took it. And I don't know if that's
Yes.
what his intention was, but that's the way I took it. That's why I was in the chat like, OMG, I'm offended right now.
Right.
Like I'm offended for me and I'm offended for the men. Linda, did
Right.
you have something?
I wanted to just say my husband was diagnosed stage 4 in 2003. He had gone with a lump in 2001, saw 2 doctors. They said it's nothing because it's rare. It wasn't biopsied or anything. So unfortunately, he was diagnosed with stage 4 in 2003. He said, I have chest cancer, because it was very embarrassing to him to say, I have breast cancer, because it's 1% of men. He never even met another man for years. So I get where Mr. Knowles is at with that, but my husband came around about a year later and said, who am I kidding? I have breast cancer. I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So, and I feel personally, it's about the science with research, with clinical trials, and he's mixing it up, and he needs to be educating everyone, especially the Black community, because they do have higher rates of cancer. And I felt like he was so disrespectful for every person, not even every man, every person that's ever been diagnosed with breast cancer and every person that's ever died of it. I just had a really hard time with his disrespect for
Right.
that.
Right.
And he wouldn't have an open dialogue, which really, I just felt like it's an important conversation to have. And I wish we could have an open dialogue with him about it. And no, we maybe won't change his mind, but
Yeah, and I think for me, like even this show and this discussion, my intention is not to try to change his mind. My intention is to let you voice how you feel about it, let others hear it, and then we can continue the conversation, because the awareness and the advocacy is super important. And I think that someone made it real plain on that conference that all the years of work that the Male Breast Cancer Coalition has put into, the hashtag men have breasts too. Just that simple notion, like you're a mammal, you have breast tissue. Like that's important. Anyone with breast tissue can have cancer. And then us, joining forces, and you see little by little, there's more awareness out there. And with all the advocates coming on board, it's, I feel like if we were to try to join forces with him as a coalition or as organizations, advocates, it kind of sets us back. I don't think we're going to change his mind, but I'd like to ask Gary what he thinks about this.
Well, as a man of color, as well as a PhD, it offends me on a lot of different levels. Um, first of all, it's been mentioned that the people of color are much more likely to have different diseases, even with COVID going on right now. Much higher rate of COVID, much higher rate of a lot of different diseases. And a lot of that is because of lack of education and misinformation.
Mhm.
And so that does nothing to serve the community. It only pushes the topic more into the shadows,
Mhm.
which then comes when something's in the dark, comes out distrust. And so the only way to overcome that distrust and the only way to bring about the acknowledgement that it exists is to bring it out to the light, and so everyone can accept it. And so if someone comes up that's, let's say, famous, such as Dr. Knowles, I have breast cancer. Then when someone else has it, they say, well, Dr. Knowles has it.
Mhm.
So it's okay for me to say it as well. Don't cover it up.
Right.
As a PhD, your job is to enlighten. That is what the term doctor is. Doctor means to teach. And it was reserved in the 12th century for men of higher education to impart knowledge, to enlighten, to teach. And when he says things like chest cancer, not breast cancer, he is doing the very opposite of that.
Here, here.
Agreed.
The amen choir.
See, I mean, and I mean, he's Beyonce's dad, and that's where I think I'm like, okay, he should be the one, like Dr. Gary said, be the advocate, say it, because if you say it, a whole bunch more people will say it. You know, if you say chest, it's going to lead everybody down the wrong path.
When we were on that call, that was the recurring theme. You know, everybody was very respectful and acknowledging that we get it. We hear the words coming out of his mouth. We understand it. Some of us get it more than others, just because we've been in that community, or for Tammy and I, both having been married to Black men and realizing, you know, that is an issue. But the punchline, if he really wants to, one of the things I said is, okay, fine. If that's what you absolutely insist on calling to get more people to listen to you, then let the punchline be, but guys, did you know it's actually breast cancer? And from a marketing, and I'm not a marketing person, but I'm thinking from a marketing standpoint, is that not the happy medium? Tammy, what do you think about that?
I absolutely agree. I think there's a happy marriage in there between the ways that you can, you know, come up with a catchphrase, do whatever it is that you need to do to, you know, talk about those things at the same time, but doing it instead of and intentionally avoiding the word breast, I think he's absolutely doing a disservice. And one of the things I also, and this is sort of a whole nother topic, but this is one of the things that he was really leaning on in that conversation, was he was talking about it. He thinks of it as a respect thing, and he would be able to take off his shirt today and run down the street as a man, and you women can't do that, and you have these fragile sensitivities, and you know your female, you know, anatomy, and God bless you. And you know, the way that he was approaching it was
very condescending.
it was very condescending. But the problem is, even, I mean, take the whole male anatomy but male breast cancer conversation out of it. Just when you're talking to women that have breast cancer, they are tired of their breasts being over sexualized.
Right.
It is basic anatomy. It is something that we have to talk about. Women shouldn't be in this place where they can't show a nipple, for the love of God. And so
Right.
I don't think that he's doing any of that community any kind of favors either. It's definitely a disservice for the entire movement of desexualizing breasts, getting breast cancer more into the forefront, something that people should not be ashamed of, that we can talk about very openly as a community, white, Black, anyone. And, you know, just if we could just desexualize the breast conversation, then, you know, we'd be going a whole long way in the same vein that he's talking about with, you know, moving away from the sensitivities of men and the word breast. Like it's a bigger problem. And I know that as America, you know, we are a lot more guarded in that in that regard than most of the other countries about women's sexuality and, you know, freedom of you know, nudity and things like that. So I think that it's definitely not just a cultural problem, or not Mr. Knowles' problem, but you know, it's more of a broader issue. But that's, I don't think that you know, giving some, you know, undue respect to, you know, sexualizing breasts is beneficial to anyone at all.
Yeah, it made me feel like, oh, so should I be embarrassed?
Right.
And
right.
what about the women that decide to stay flat or for whatever
Right.
reason can't have reconstruction, even if they want it. So are we supposed to be embarrassed? Am I less of a woman? Pat, what do you have to say about this? Pat's been so quiet. We haven't let her get a word in.
Oh,
That's okay. That's okay. You know, at the time that he came out on Good Morning America and on Dr. Oz and said that he had breast cancer, as bad as it sounds, I was excited because I was looking at someone with some clout, maybe helping us get the word out to the world that men can get breast cancer. And I did not realize that he had changed his tune on this. I was surprised on that phone call when he came out and said he had male chest cancer. And if you go back and look at the recording, I probably was rolling my eyes. I was just in shock that this man that I really and truly had hoped would help us, get the word out there that he was saying what he was saying. First of all, that he had male chest cancer. And then when he was talking about, in my mind, basically dumbing down his conversation with the Black and brown population. I have talked to many Black and brown individuals and groups. I have never dumbed down the conversation. I tell them we all have breast tissue. It can happen. It doesn't matter if you're young, if you're old, if you're black, white, green, purple. I don't care. We can all get breast cancer. And I was probably more offended by the fact that he felt it was necessary to dumb down the conversation that he was having with his people. And when I say his people, I mean everybody that he has talked with. But he also made a statement, and I wrote this one down so I wouldn't forget it. His comment about a man could really feel better about himself saying he has male chest cancer instead of breast cancer. Bull. I call bull on that.
Yeah.
I have never had a man, and I don't care what color he is, but I have never had a man walk away from me because I was telling him it was possible to get breast cancer. I really thought that this was going to be an opportunity for Matthew Knowles to hopefully help out the Male Breast Cancer Coalition and bring awareness to everybody. And I don't think that has happened even a little bit. And I'm worried he is so concerned about the stigma. What is he doing? He's adding to that stigma.
Yeah.
I think our men are smarter than that. Sorry,
Well-
I do. I give our men a lot more credit than what I feel like he is giving them.
Well, this can still be an opportunity to forward your message. He has a very large platform. So when you challenge that platform at every turn, that still gets the message out. So when he's speaking, he says chest cancer, and there's someone that comes on and says, no, it is not chest cancer, it is breast cancer. There are people who will hear that and say, let me think about that. And maybe they will start to change their mind.
I agree. And I asked him on that call, were you diagnosed with chest cancer or were you diagnosed with breast cancer? Because if he told me chest cancer, I would be quiet about it. But he said it was a marketing thing and he won't discuss it. But I think that's a trust thing too, because he's telling whoever he speaks to using his platform that it's chest cancer. But when if they end up going to a doctor and eventually being diagnosed, they will be diagnosed with breast cancer. So they're not going to end up with a chest cancer diagnosis. So it's misinformation. And so, and it's not about to me, I'm not a marketing person, but it's not about the marketing. It's the human part of it. And like Pat said, I do feel like he's dumbing it down, and that's wrong. I mean,
It's offensive to me.
it's offensive.
Absolutely.
It's offensive to
Absolutely.
me.
And he needs to educate them. And I think it has to do with his own masculinity personally.
Absolutely.
And he needs, like my own husband, he had to deal with his at the beginning when he said it was chest cancer. And I think because of his platform, he really needs to address that issue with himself. And that's my personal.
How do you feel about like when someone's a public figure? Like we're swirling here because I'm thinking about you do another podcast with sports about sports,
yeah.
right?
Sports. No.
I'm thinking about sports, but I'm thinking about like when people automatically assign, how do you say it? Or they expect a sports figure to be a perfect role model, or they expect a celebrity. You know, I think this speaks to that. Like we always say at the CARE Project, as well as at the Male Breast Cancer Coalition, we're just the little guys, right? But we're the ones that have all the heart because we've lived this. So I think that I was thinking about you a lot, Linda, because I know you were livid. You had to get off the call at some point, and I was like, oh, I need to calm her down. But at the same time, I was thinking like, this is a wake up call for all of us, right? We don't need to rely on anybody else. We need to keep doing what we do. And I think that it's apples and oranges. Our purpose comes from the heart. It comes from the standpoint, like Tammy said, like we want to see more clinical trials that involve men, period, right? We want to see more marketing. I've talked to my own hospital here about, you know, when I get off the elevator in October, there's that big poster board, get your mammograms. That's all pink and it's all the women, the female statistics. So I think we need to not give him so much energy in terms of, hey, join our team, because I think he's in it for a different reason.
I agree.
I'm just assuming, but I don't know.
I would very much agree because after Carrie talked to me about the podcast or the meeting and the conversation, I looked him up and I looked at different videos, and he says breast cancer when it's beneficial for him to say it. So he goes back and forth between the terms depending on the context of the conversation and whether or not it's beneficial for him to say breast or chest. So I think ultimately it's about marketing himself.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And you know, that one of the things that he said that was really interesting to me is he said, and this was in the lines with his dialogue around the use of the words chest cancer, was he said, you know, when I was on Good Morning America and Strahan and Robin Roberts came up to me afterwards, both of them said I'd never told anyone that my brother had breast cancer until now, as if his use of chest cancer was the reason that happened. You go back to that day, he was talking about breast cancer and they were talking about breast cancer. He's mixing the message for his own purpose and his own benefit. And I think it looks good in headlines for him to say, you know, I'm doing something different and, you know, give me, and he has a platform. He's a you know, national figure. He has a famous daughter and very similar to Pat when he was, when he first was diagnosed, I was doing a talk for you, Carrie, at your benefit last year. And then shortly after I was on CBS 2 News doing a talk about male breast cancer. And both times I said, I'm actually glad that he is a national figure at this time in history, having this, you know, diagnosis, and what a great opportunity to get the message out in a new and different way. And then for him to recoil months later and start changing the dialogue, I'm very disappointed. And I do think that exactly what you said, Carrie, it's up to us to, you know, to just continue down this path. And, you know, and as Dr. Johnson said, is, you know, to combat that message when you hear it, when it's in front of you, you know, like we just have to keep trying to advocate for what's right. And even in that call with us the other day, he said, I'm not talking about science, I'm talking about marketing. More than once he said that.
He was very adamant that was his angle, and that's all it was for him. It was
exactly.
He was very clear about that. He said, look, I didn't come on here for you to try to change my mind.
Right.
He said that.
He did. Well, and he also said, I'm not among peers here. And he sort of scoffed at the idea that he might be among people that would understand what his plight was. He was really coming from this, you know, podium of excellence and talking down to us, which I thought was equally offensive. But he more than once said science is not what his angle is, but you cannot change the fact that the science and the actual anatomy is what it is. And by the way, there is a whole classification of chest cancers that are not related to breast. Right. And like, I've been having this conversation since then. I've been kind of in a tizzy talking about it.
All been.
I know, right?
It's so infuriating. Tired of me talking about it.
It is just so infuriating. And, you know, I just feel like it's misinformation along the lines of what Linda said, you know, that your diagnosis is going to be breast cancer, your treatment is going to be breast cancer, and you don't have a thoracic cancer, that you do not have, you know, like a mid-sternum cancer. Like those are very different anatomical things. And Like I was even trying to make parallels, like when there are a whole classification of head and neck cancers, and then there's brain cancer, and you don't mix the two because they're very distinctly different. Your symptoms are different, your treatments are different, and so for us to just continue to like go down the path of chest cancer when that's anatomically incorrect, and it just doesn't benefit anyone.
Well,
Right.
remember how he said also he wouldn't tell us we had prostate cancer?
Right.
Saying he does not have breast because
Right.
we don't have a prostate.
Right.
And
That was a ridiculous parallel. Mhm.
I
Well,
think my biggest issue with Mr. Knowles is that he's really doing a disservice to everyone, every person, everywhere. And that's my biggest issue is it's just a disservice.
Now, I would always say the biggest detriment to marketing is for when someone looks bad. When something comes out negative about a person, what happens to their marketing? What happens to endorsements? They go away.
Mhm.
And it's the same thing for him. When he starts looking bad, he will change. And that was probably one of the things on that call. When you challenged him, he felt he started to look bad and he didn't like it.
Yeah.
So if that continued, he would either go down that path of looking bad and that becomes public, or he will have to change.
Mhm.
Or hang up.
Yeah.
I think you already did that once, didn't you?
Yeah. Twice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. There's a lot of lessons to be learned here. Me, I'm always trying to find the bright side, right? And the perspective is everything. Just because that helps me keep myself calm, because I was livid. I was trying to talk to Gary and tell him, like, you're not going to believe this. And I was working at the time I was listening, and I just had my first COVID vaccination, and I was kind of freaked out, worrying, like, am I going to pass out any minute or grow another ear, So I'm trying to listen. And then Peggy pulled me up on the stage and I was like, I didn't ask a question, but I was physically shaking when I was speaking because I was so angry. I think I'm very protective of the guys in the coalition. I
Mhm.
feel like, what's the term? There's girl dads, right? And boy dads, but I don't,
Brothers.
yeah, I only have brothers and most of my best friends are males. And so I feel real at home within the male breast cancer coalition. So
Family. It's our family.
it is family. It is family. And so when he was just dumbing down the male population, let alone men of color, which my son is one of them, that's a effing problem for me,
Mhm.
but I just think we just don't. This is a lesson. You don't rely on celebrities or public figures to help you get your message across. And
Mhm.
not everybody who's spitting out a message, even though the message might sound the same, if it's not coming from the same intention, doesn't matter. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep. And I think, this is a perfect opportunity to put science out there. Black and brown men are diagnosed at a higher rate. They have a higher mortality rate than white males counterparts in the same diagnosis. And so, I think it's even more important for that community to hear the right message because, my husband was diagnosed at stage 3. We had no idea. And by the way, he did actually have chest lymph nodes that were impacted because it had already traveled to his lymph nodes by the time he was diagnosed. And so there were chest involvement, but that the actual tumor itself, the original cancer, is breast cancer, and it was always treated as such. And so, his battle was 2.5 years or so, whatever, and it was, brutal, but it wasn't the diagnosis that was hard. It was the treatment that was hard, and being able to walk into a clinic and be handed a pink robe and walk through a door that says women only, and to constantly feel ostracized in a place where you're supposed to be healing and getting better. And so, if there's any opportunity in this to just continue to press the message that the Black and brown community is at a greater impact, plus over the course of history, there's certainly, shortcomings in the medical treatment of those communities as well. And so,
Right.
those two
Right.
things hand in hand is a recipe for disaster if you don't advocate in the right way and, continue to dumb down a message that's critically important to people and their well-being.
Amen.
Well put.
I'm dropping the mic for her right now. No, what do you think about what she just said?
No, absolutely. And ultimately, I would say use his platform for your benefit. When he shows up on Facebook, show up there. When he gives his message, you give yours, and you can use his platform. I was probably about 10 years ago. I was going to a restaurant and I was thinking, there's all these different restaurants right in one area. Aren't they afraid of the competition? And so this man that I was with, he says, no, he says, restaurants do that because then they filter people to the other restaurants. If this restaurant is full, they start going to this one and check this one out. And then they start going to that one. And so that's why restaurants kind of congregate in the same area, even though they're competition, they benefit and feed off of each other. And I would say, do the same thing. When he appears, you appear. When he says his message, you challenge his message and it will get out there. You can use his platform for your message.
I've tried. I'm not a tweeter on Twitter,
Yeah.
but since our call last week, I have tweeted about Matt. I've tagged him and done what I could on social media, on Twitter. I'm learning and I'm going to progress with it, but I agree with
Well,
you.
Chris and I have recently joined Clubhouse, and we got Dr. Johnson on it too. So we're gonna, if any of you are on there, I know Linda's on there. Tammy, you should get on there
No,
too.
I'm not. Okay.
Yeah, you should. I can send you an invite. It's only for iPhone users at this point, but
Thank you.
Fine.
Carrie. My sister was on it and she keeps talking about it. And I was like, well, I can't get on. And so yesterday, thank you.
Yeah, you got it. I've learned so much, and you can just pop in these rooms and just be a fly on the wall and listen to all kinds of people.
It's like live podcasting.
Yeah,
in a sense.
but you're in
Interesting.
there
Topics
with all kinds of doctors, so
Yeah,
on.
I listen to mine
professionals in the
all the
industry of
time.
whatever it is and everything. Yeah.
But this guy, Gary, gets on. We're on the phone one night and I go, okay, I'm going to send you the invite. Are you sure? Because once you give out an invite, you don't get it back, right? Like you better use it. Yeah, okay, fine. So we're on the phone and he gets on. He's like, okay, I'm on. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, I'm going to start a room. I'm like, no, don't start a room. So what does he do? He titles it male breast cancer. And we're on the phone, right? And so he goes, oh my God, there's like 4 people in my room. I'm like, get out of there. We're not ready. It's like 10:30. I'm like, we don't even know how to use it yet. Get the hell out of there. So, but we're going to do it. I think the 3 of us can have
it'd be
that
fun.
dialogue.
I actually had searched for male breast cancer on it because I was trying to learn a little bit about it. And there's a few things that I found on it, but I had looked for male breast cancer.
Yeah.
So I'll have to look for Gary Johnson.
You'll find my room.
Which is not moderated and there's no content.
That's right.
Nothing going on in there right now.
Will it just be you and I?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But I did find Dr. Knowles on Clubhouse. So I started following him today. So look at Linda grabs her phone.
Right.
But it's cool. It's not like you're posting, you're not messaging each other privately. You're simply going into rooms where conversations like this are happening live.
Mhm.
So we plan to host a lot of them, and we'll rope this guy in too, to bring in that the black male PhD perspective, since he kept dropping his PhD at us too. Look at Pat. Pat's rolling her eyes. Oh, any
Yeah.
final words, Pat?
Pardon me?
Any final word?
We just need to keep getting the word out there. We need to reach out to absolutely everybody. Like I said before, I don't care what age anyone is, what color they are, man, woman, anything in between. I don't care. I stop and talk to them. They all need to know that this can happen. We've got to get the word out. And we've got to get the word out that it is breast cancer, because everyone has breast tissue. We just have to get the word out. We've got to keep educating people. I see so much more in the world today than when my husband was diagnosed only 4 years ago. And I only had him for 5 months, and I didn't know the Male Breast Cancer Coalition at the time. So I was really doing everything I was doing. I was blind going into this. But if I would have known then what I know now, may not have given Marlon any more time, but I think I could have maybe made him feel more comfortable. His daughter had been diagnosed with breast cancer 2 years earlier. And so he didn't always trust in everything that I said, but he would trust anything his daughter said to him.
And
because
that's
she
the
was
power. That's the power of having survivor mentors, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we link people up all the time. It's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate that you guys are doing this podcast. I think it's amazing. I appreciate very much that we have the two gentlemen on with us, that we're not on that phone call the other night. I just appreciate everything that all of you have done.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks for everything you do. Why don't you
Yeah.
shout out the Male Breast Cancer's website for everybody too?
It is the Male Breast Cancer Coalition.org.
So anyone
And
who
we
wants more
and we have self-exam cards available on that website. Excellent for people that don't know how to do an exam. It is, we have one side that's pink for the women, the other side is blue for the men. Brett Miller, the founder of it, the co-founder, he also has a video out there that you can watch to learn exactly how to do it. And let me just mention this much about Brett. Okay, I keep talking that it doesn't matter what your age is. Brett was only 17 years old when he found his lump. He was not diagnosed at 17. He wasn't diagnosed until he was 24. He found his lump at 17 and he went to the doctor, and the doctor misdiagnosed him. We do have another gentleman, another brother in the Male Breast Cancer Coalition that was actually diagnosed at 17. And he just turned 67. He is a 50-year survivor.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
Sam.
Amazing.
Right? Sam.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it is survivable, but we've got to diagnose it soon, you know,
Early.
and you've got to get treatment. You've got to, so often it's our doctors that are just, they look for the women with breast cancer. Sadly, they completely overlook a lot of our men.
Yeah.
My big mouth. I mention that all the time on this show. Like doctors have
Good.
to do better.
Good.
And
Absolutely.
we as
Also, if a man goes to a doctor for a physical right now, they don't bring up breast cancer.
right.
And
That's what I was just gonna
even
say.
And in 2021, I mean, last year, I still meet men, and when you say, oh yeah, Bob has breast cancer, they're like, what? I didn't know I could get breast cancer. So here we are in 2021, and men aren't aware any mammal that has a breast can get breast cancer.
Right.
And that to me is very shocking that there's men and doctors in a physical don't even talk about it or do an exam.
Right. Right. We always say that on the show too. Like if you're a man and you're going in for a physical anyway, tell them, hey, can you check my breast while I'm here?
I tell every man that.
I just found out that men get breast cancer, and I would love to hear what the reactions are.
Yes.
But I thankfully I know a lot of doctors locally now through Dr. Martin, who sits on our board and is one of my best friends, and she's gotten me in to speak to her peers at Kaiser Permanente, and it's the
Good.
one thing that I bring up every single time.
Mhm.
Like, I know you guys are rushed for our appointments, but take 5 minutes and check me out. Right. But the Male Breast Cancer Coalition website is chock full of information, and those self-exam cards are downloadable. They're also in several languages, right?
21.
Yeah.
Wow.
21 different
Awesome.
languages. Very
That's
cool.
great.
Yeah.
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 And I would also advocate that the Male Breast Cancer Coalition is great for patients, but it's also a lot of family support, caregiver support, grief support, all of the above. So, you know, it really is a big family and has been very beneficial to me and you know, both while Mike was sick and after his passing. And so I'm very grateful for that organization and all that they do.
It's kind of like a gang. Like we get jumped in and we never get out.
Right.
That's right.
We don't. I had one conversation with Peggy. Now she's on my phone all the time, you know? So
Well, I think we know your next mark.
yeah.
Bob had never met a man with breast cancer, and I found Peggy online 6 or 7 years ago, and I reached out to her, and they were doing Tops Off New York City. And so I said to Bob, let's plan a trip to New York. And Bob met 9 men in New York that had breast cancer the first
Amazing.
time. And he had breast cancer 10 or 11 years by then. So, you know,
The first time I attended the annual conference, my friend Nicole went with me as my seeing eye person in New York. And I met these guys and I just thought, they're going to probably think like, why is she here? You know, like as if I had bad intentions. And I was like, no, I'm your ally. But I was really shy to really like get to approach a lot of the guys. Brett, I knew because we've been talking. I am shy. Shut up. I am. But I will say this, the following year when I went to the conference in Florida, I really had a lot more time. I developed relationships with these guys online. I developed all these relationships with guys online, right? All my fellow breast cancer survivors.
Great.
But when I got to Florida, oh my God, I walked in and I was greeted with more hugs in 30 minutes than I had in 3 years.
Yeah.
And it was, I always say, men are like the unicorn of breast cancer, because when you turn on your TV, especially in god awful Pinktober, you see all these heartwarming commercials of all these women at these walks and in the camaraderie. And that's a beautiful thing. Don't get me wrong. But as someone who has 3 brothers, and until breast cancer didn't have a lot of female friends, I was so at home with these guys, and to watch them just surround each other with their vulnerability, yet their strength and their camaraderie, it was overwhelming. And when I came back, and Dr. Martin was with me for that one. And when we came back to report to the board, I was like sobbing in my boardroom, because I was like, you guys don't even understand, because we put a lot of time and effort into raising awareness here at the Care Project. And my board at first, I'll be honest, they were kind of like, well, really, it's only like 1%. And you know what my comeback to that was, right? I don't need to say it, right? What if that 1% was my brother, right?
That's what I say.
Right.
And the other thing I wanted to just touch on real quick with Mr. Knowles, and I may have misunderstood him, but I sort of felt he felt like every man with breast cancer had the BRCA gene. That's not true, because my husband tested negative, and I sort of felt like he was making it sound like every person has that gene.
Yeah.
So I think it's important too to realize that not everybody carries the gene that gets breast cancer.
Most people don't.
Right.
Most breast cancer is not genetic.
Right.
It's deemed sporadic. So there's a lot more to learn. And that's the importance of the research and the clinical trials, right, Tammy?
Absolutely.
Ugh.
Absolutely.
And the podcast. We got to bring awareness.
Oh, yeah, podcast. It gives us an opportunity to run our mouths and vent.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, everything's better with talking. If you talk about it, it gets it out there. People are more comfortable with it. People learn about it. And education is, like Dr. Gary said, important and key.
Yeah. We're going to give you the final word, Dr. Johnson.
I call him Dr. Gary.
Hey, Dr. Gary,
He'll answer to anything. I drug him here. I'm like, come on, I need you on the show.
Yeah. First and foremost, I want to thank you ladies for everything that you do. And I want you to know, in case you have doubt, that what you do is important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for men, for women, for all people of different races, it is very important what you do. And I commend you and thank you for what you do. So, and ultimately it is a very important topic. And I think we need to get it out there. As far as
he's on our team now.
I don't think he ever wasn't.
right. So, and just as far as Dr. Knowles, he's going to say what he's going to say. You say what you're going to say, and then we just see how it all shakes out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I can not wait.
I can't either.
I'm speechless right now.
I'm going to invite him into my room.
Yeah, right.
Oh, crap. We got to get on Clubhouse.
Heads up.
Yeah. Oh,
he'll leave if he sees me there. No.
Right.
Label it chest cancer, and then when he enters, change it back to breast cancer.
No, we're using the new hashtag breast, not chest.
Not chest.